Marc Farrell is reimagining what rum can be and sharing Caribbean culture with the world through his 10-to-1 distillery. Prior to founding the company, Farrell was the youngest VP in Starbucks history at age 33. Born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, he attended MIT at age 16, followed by the University of Cambridge and Harvard Business School. Today, he'll show you how you can pivot to success and grow your business in the digital age. Let's give a warm welcome to Marc Farrell.
Hi, Marc. Welcome to the Bahamas virtually. It's an honor to host you virtually here today. A special thank you to our partners at Tech Beach for connecting Marc with our innovation audience today. Marc, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're sending you some of our Bahamian love and Bahamian sun, and of course, all the Caribbean flavor that we can possibly send you over there. How are you today?
Yeah, doing pretty well, Darren. Thanks so much for having me. Really great pleasure to join you guys this morning. Sorry I couldn't be down there in person, but hopefully for the next one.
Well, it's delayed but not denied. We'll make certain that happens somewhere in 2022 or somewhere in 2023. Marc, I had the opportunity to do some, fantastic research on you. And what I found so interesting was not only your academic past, not only, what you've done in terms of your career, but the way you've taken this product and the cultural aspects and historical aspects that you've brought out of it. I mean, I was listening to it and thought about bootlegging. It took me back into my history class from like grade 7. And that's just a lot of thought and the involvement of the creative culture and the creative economy. But I want to know, what was your passion and dream career while you were at school? I was supposed to be a medical doctor. Evidently, that didn't happen. But tell me about you and what that passion was and that drive was.
Yeah, I mean, if I kind of think back through the school days, anything from professional athlete to nuclear physicist to sort of Fortune 500 CEO. But the entrepreneurial passion was always there. I kind of remember sitting in class in Form 4, Form 5 and talking about, wanting to build this corporation one day that could have an impact, certainly on the Caribbean stage and on the global stage as well. I think, though, there is a long journey that you might take at times trying to figure out sort of exactly where that entrepreneurial passion resides and where you have an opportunity to kind of carve out that niche in the broader business landscape. So, between then and now, that's 25 years ago at this point, having done everything from management consulting and private equity to starting a business in sports media to obviously spending some time at Starbucks before finding my way home to 10-to-1 rum.
Well, Marc, you said that so with such humility, spending some time at Starbucks. Let me just inform the studio audience and those that's joining us virtually. You were vice president of e-commerce at Starbucks in your early 30s. Their youngest VP ever. I'd like to say that I contributed significantly to your salary in the amount of white chocolate mochas I purchased. But, how did you climb the corporate ladder so fast at such a young age?
It's a great question. Sometimes I wonder that myself. I think that a combination of factors were at play there, right? I mean, some of it honestly is just the good fortune of having someone, in this case Howard Schultz, who is founder and CEO of Starbucks, who's willing to take a chance on you and believes in you, right? I think as a young up and coming entrepreneur or young up and coming sort of corporate executive, I think it does take a little bit of belief on the part of others who kind of see something in you that sometimes you don't see in yourself. So I always kind of want to start by paying sort of due respect and giving due credit there, because I think that it's very hard to kind of sit down and say that that is entirely a testament to the things that you have done on an individual level. I think for me, if I kind of go through my career from the very beginning to now, finding those mentors who are able to shine a little bit of a light for you in terms of what's been done before, ways in which you can approach it, and again, kind of give you that encouragement to stretch yourself beyond what you think might be possible, I think is honestly a big part of that story. I think the other lesson from that Starbucks experience is, and I say this a lot, Whenever the story of someone's career trajectory gets told, even sort of in the opening bio and all of that stuff, it ends up getting told in a very sort of linear fashion, and it gets told in a way that makes it all sound like it made sense. So I did this, and then I did this other thing, and I did this other thing, and they were all great, and they were all successful, and that's actually not
They
the way
all
it
lined up.
works,
They all.
right? Yeah. It's. I tell people, your career journey, just like innovation, just like success, they're all nonlinear. And I think a big part of even the Starbucks experience was this kind of willingness to say yes to things, say yes to one additional conversation, yes to one additional introduction, one additional meeting, and you never know where those things might lead. And so I think kind of, again, approaching it with a relatively open mind, some enthusiasm, of course, having the confidence to share your own personal story and the things that you could uniquely bring to the table. I remember when I got to Starbucks, one piece of counsel I got from Howard and from our CMO at the time, Sharon Rothstein, was to, really kind of be yourself, right? You're here for a particular reason to bring a very specific point of view, a specific lens
Exactly.
that you can offer. So you're not trying to sort of like shape shift and fit in with the sort of the perspective and the experience others have. I think kind of carving out that niche for yourself where you are bringing something unique to the table is a major ingredient in, I think, securing a role like that.
Marc, when I listen to you, and especially being in my field as a human resource person, right? Sometimes people believe that their career journey or the success journey, as you said, should be a straight line, and they don't understand that it's a journey, which means you got turns, and you have a red light sometimes, a amber light, and a green light. And not every day that green light is going to be green. And so when I listen to you, you say two things here. One, it's not always linear, and two, mentors. No man or woman is an island. And the question I think persons need to ask as they listen to you is, who is that support system that you have outside of your family? Who is that person that sees it before you see it, and continue to push you? But you went from a high-powered executive job, and it wasn't linear. I think it was at this particular point, you went from a steady paycheck to risking it all, like completely flat, like deuces, I'm gone, like I'm doing something big. Like how did you make that pivot? Like what was the mental process that you went through? What was the thing that got you to say, I'm out, I'm gonna take a chance on myself? What was that experience like? What was that thought process like?
Yeah, I always tell people that in a lot of ways, when you sort of land in this entrepreneurial sphere, it starts off as a little seed that's planted, fairly innocuous at times. Might be something fairly whimsical, might come up in conversation with your friends, might be a problem you've spotted sort of in the wider world. And it's one of those things that kind of takes root in your mind, right? And continues to grow, continues to matriculate, I think, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Some people kind of ask me, how did I get to the point where I decided to leave Starbucks and start 10 to 1? It got to the point where it was impossible to ignore, right? And you're having these conversations with your friends, with colleagues, you're pressure testing it. In my case, you're sitting at a bar talking to bartenders, trying to understand the pain points and the problem points, and really kind of developing a more, I'd say, a more nuanced sense of what both the challenges and the opportunities in the industry might look like. For me, I actually was an entrepreneur prior to going to Starbucks. I had a business in sports and media for a few years, and which was an interesting experience. I would say it was a middling success, to be quite candid. Landed at Starbucks. Wasn't actually sure that I was going to go back to being an entrepreneur, that is founding a business. But about halfway through my Starbucks tenure, the entrepreneurial mojo started to come back. I think anybody who started a business, that feeling is pretty familiar, right?
The nudge, the needling, right?
Yeah. The painful memories kind of recede faster than the joy and the pleasure does, and so like you kind of forget what you're actually signing up for. But about 18 months in, entrepreneurial mojo came back. Honestly, looking at a guy like Howard Schultz again, up close, where you see what it looks like for an entrepreneur to have built a business through the lens of who they are and what they care about. I think to me that was a big takeaway from my time there, where like it precipitated this question in me, right? Like, okay, so he's done this, like what would my version of that be? You know, what are the unique stories,
Yeah.
cultural
Yeah.
stories, personal stories, points of perspective that you could bring to bear when you're going to go create a business or launch a brand? Because ultimately that is what a consumer brand is, right? I mean, I think there's something that should be
Correct.
uniquely personal to you when you're bringing that to market. And so, yeah, sort of started on that question. And again, you know, I've been, in and out of the US and the UK for 22 years at this point. And, as it pertains to rum specifically, I walk into any bar in downtown New York with a bunch of my friends. And you've seen that over time, they've been from their early 20s to late 30s, which is where I am now. You've seen that they've been able to kind of elevate their taste over time. If you're a tequila drinker today, a mezcal, gin, whiskey, etc., and rum, particularly in this market, is so underappreciated and I think so misrepresented, to the point of frustration, right? As somebody who, I think has a passion for the spirit and also, of course, is from Trinidad and is from the Caribbean. And so that's kind of, again, the seed that was planted. Like why do people sort of think about rum as this kind of pigeonhole it as a sort of low end spirit? They tell me stories of these sugary, slushy cocktails they had on spring break. The narrative around the category seems to be co-opted by pirates and plantations. And can you find a way to bring something to market that feels a little bit more elevated, a little bit more contemporary, and definitely a little bit more authentic as well? I say that, when you look at the Caribbean, we don't have any shortage of stories to tell, right? You usually say, well, we have a dearth of cultural moorings and identity and heritage, and it's this
Exactly.
crazy rich fabric and tapestry. So tell those stories instead of whatever folks have been sharing previously, and I think you'll find that again, there's kind of no shortage of opportunity in that vein. And so really kind of is a combination of that catalyst. I think thinking more holistically about what it would take to jump back in and become an entrepreneur, with finding these specific pain points or opportunities in and around spirits, that kind of led me back down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I want to say before I jump into my next question, just looking at the way you've pulled the stories and the way you took us through the streets. I mean, not us, everybody hasn't watched it yet. The streets of the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and looking at the history of carnival and the history of slavery and the history of bootlegging, and bringing that all together, and then roping in the creative economy as a part of that story. I mean, it's genius for me. And so I want to ask you this question. That's the story part of it, but the engineering part of what it is to run a business and the finances, how did the corporate world help you to be a successful entrepreneur today?
A ton of different ways. I think I've been lucky to. I often say that Starbucks. What does selling coffee have to do with rum? What does being a corporate vice president have to do with being an entrepreneur? I mean, on the surface, you might say nothing, but I mean, to me, Starbucks was a really great finishing school for me. It's almost how I think about it. And I had some great foundational experiences before then. I mean, everybody talks about the Starbucks thing now, but my first job out of college was at Bain and Company, management consulting. Loved the culture there, learned a ton. 15 years later, I use a lot of those skills as well. Really kind of turns you into a little bit of a corporate athlete. Right, so you can do everything from read a P&L to build a model to build a basic plan, and what have you. But coming out of Starbucks, I say actually one of the things that it fostered in me that's been super useful with 10 to 1 is a sense of brand discipline. I think it's something that is overlooked when, I think it's true in any startup, but certainly anything in the consumer space, where you have to have a very clear, very pointed view of what you will and won't do, what you do and don't stand for. And I think there's no way to scale a business to the size of a Starbucks or a Nike or kind of pick your favorite ones without that kind of brand discipline.
Yeah.
I don't know that I had that same level of brand discipline going into it as I did when I came out 3 years later. And then, there's things, you think about something like to kind of move from brand to operational elements, like the nitty gritty of the business. I also ran for Starbucks part of our retail business, what we call the retail lobby: packaged coffee, packaged food, merchandise, which has a lot of supply chain challenges when you're thinking about how you're moving this inventory across 13,000
Correct. Yeah.
nodes, 13,000 stores in the US. that introduces a different level of paranoia as a leader, where you have to think about, risk mitigation, making sure things kind of get there
Exactly.
on time, or over investing in process. And again, 10 to 1 is a tiny business, but you look at the supply chain challenges in and around spirits, glass, and what have you today. And I think some of those pieces, in terms of how you really kind of like raise the alarm before you get to a point where the house is really on fire. I think some of those lessons
Exactly.
from the corporate world, you bring them to the entrepreneurial sphere as well, and they end up being quite useful.
And that resonates with me. Here being a part of BTC, I just never ever appreciated supply chain until the COVID era, right? It's like you get a better appreciation of how a business needs to run when you don't have the things sometimes to run the business. And so I think you speak to that. And I want to ask this question. What are some of the key elements of being a successful entrepreneur or a small business owner? I think you spoke about the brand discipline as one of them, but I'm certain that there are some other takeaways, some other nuggets about the key elements that you can give our audience today.
To being a successful entrepreneur,
Correct.
well, I think
Patience.
patience, resilience, stick-to-itiveness. I mean, the list is long. I mean, maybe most importantly is never referring to yourself as a successful entrepreneur. I think the journey is long, the road is winding. You're always a work in progress. I know that I'm very much a work in progress and trying to sort of build every day and get a little bit better every day. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think there's certain pieces of it, right? I mean, again, some of them are known and fairly obvious. I always tell people, again, if you're gonna start a business, you're gonna launch a brand, you have to be willing to ask yourself if you're willing to tell that story literally 1 million times, because that's a number of
Yeah.
times you're going to have to
Yeah.
explain to people sort of where your vision comes from, where the passion comes from, and what sort of business you're endeavoring to build. So if you're a little bit iffy on the concept, iffy on the idea, that's probably not the one to invest in. I do think the idea of resilience is obviously important. Again, it doesn't matter what sort of stories you see in flashing lights on media or social media. I think it's fair to say that no one has kind of a straight line to success. And so knowing upfront that you're going to have those pitfalls, and really sort of how you bounce back from them, how you to me, everything affords some opportunity for learning, right? So even in those moments where you get told no or you run into a wall, you kind of want to take a step back and say, all right, cool. Well, so how does that affect how I'm going to approach it the next time, right? Am I pivoting the approach? Am I pivoting who I go approach, right? Is there some sort of like kink in
Yeah.
the story that isn't effective, or in my operational model? To me, you're in this sort of like never-ending iterative loop, right? Either way, the world provides you feedback, or you go out there and you seek that feedback, right? So that you kind of continue on this path to evolution and improvement. And I would also say that you want to. Somebody said to me, yes, probably 8-9 years ago at this point, that as an entrepreneur, you're trying to find the thing that you can be the best in the world at. And I heard that advice and I took it to heart, but I think I actually misinterpreted it initially. But when I heard it, sort of in a very broad type of scale, where I said, oh, like, could I build the best sneaker company in the world, right? Can I be the best in the world at that? And I think over time I've come to realize that definition is too broad. It isn't whether you could build the best sneaker company or the best rum company. It's actually about, is there a specific perspective that you could bring to that space, a specific story you could tell, a specific lens in that particular vertical that allows you to be the best in the world, right? Like if you look at 10 to 1 and you sort of mirrored it before, Darren, like there's an element of that story that no one else can tell, right? Some dude
It's
sitting down
beautiful.
in Miami is going to come and offer the same perspective because they don't have the same experience. And so, as an entrepreneur, do not undersell the importance of your own experience, your own perspective. Lean into it with some authenticity, and you're going to find people who are willing to believe in that path that you are trying to carve, and hopefully give you an opportunity to go build it.
Marc, when you said something just now, you said, when we run into some obstacles, sometimes it's important to step back, right? And I noticed you didn't use the word step out. And I think sometimes we see entrepreneurs step out so quickly because in the loop that they're making, they're chiseling at the wall, and they're almost there where there's a hole for them to get through and actually be successful, but they step out of it versus stepping back and like getting a perspective. And it reminded me of last year, a speaker said, not every piece of feedback that you get from individuals is necessarily the feedback that you require. Sometimes you have to take what is for you, like a buffet, and leave the negativity at the table. Because when I watch your story, the one thing that exudes for me is the passion and the culture and the pride that you have for your country, but the connectivity that it has to the rum, right, to the spirit. And it makes me want to go into a nice restaurant in New York and can I have your finest 10 to 1? Because I feel a particular way about the bottle. I feel connected to the story. And so I think passion is so important, as you said. What would you say, talking about that loop and that step back, what would be a time in your story where you had to step back but not step out? That greatest challenge in entrepreneurship, that moment where your hands were up and your back was against the wall.
Yesterday, the day before, I mean, I think, I give you, we can be here for 2 hours and I'll give you examples, spirits is specifically is a very unique, especially in the US, a very unique and very difficult industry, right? I mean, if you look at sort of the 3-tier distribution system, where fundamentally you're actually serving 3 customers. You're trying to get the distributor to sell your product. You're trying to get the retailers or the restaurants, bars, etc., to buy your product, and then you're trying to get the consumer to fall in love with and consume your product. So you have 3 customers. Trying to sort of engage one customer is difficult enough. When you're trying to sort of engage 3 different customers at 3 different levels, right? It sort of it scales the problem pretty quickly, right? And maybe exponentially. So again, I think that like in that sort of environment, there's no shortage of no, right? That you'll hear. I think for us, if you are trying to turn a category on its head, we talk a lot about this idea of rum reimagined. I want to kind of take the way that the average consumer, really kind of in the US, sure, but globally, really, right, thinks about rum and turn it on its head. More contemporary, more elevated, more authentic. I think if you're trying to sort of reimagine a category, trying to move mountains, you have a lot of doubt that comes along with that, right? And so people will tell you, well, no, now is tequila's time, right? Or really refocus on whiskey and vodka here, or, there isn't a consumer who values rum in the way that you value it. I mean, you hear all of that all the time, right? And people can say it very nicely, right? Like, Godspeed, good luck, wish you well, but, don't believe in the thing that you're doing. If I think about my entrepreneurial journey over the last, decade or so at this point, I think when I used to get that feedback, entrepreneurs early in their cycle do a lot of this. You kind of high amplitude whipsawing back and forth between the highs and the lows. Somebody gives you a piece of feedback. I talk about this idea of feedback pellets. You get a feedback pellet and it takes you to the moon, right? And then somebody kind of tells you next minute the thing is not working, or you can't get the contract, or you can't get an opportunity, and then boom, like literally, I go back to my apartment, get in my bed, turn the lights off, and just kind of sit there for a while, right? And so you're sort of bouncing back and forth between these sort of emotionally unstable nodes, right? And over time,
almost like a bipolar experience, almost.
It is 100%, and I think over time you come to realize that you can't sort of live and die with every piece of feedback, right? And I think something you said there to me is totally true. I talk a lot about whether it's great businesses or great leaders or what have you. I always think in quartiles, like first quartile, second quartile, third quartile, fourth quartile, right? And in a lot of ways, you kind of focus on the first and the fourth quartile, and the stuff in the middle doesn't really matter, right? First quartile, like, I'm looking at this incredible leader or this incredible business. What are 3 things that they do that I would want to emulate? If I was going to start a business tomorrow, what are 3 attributes that person has, or that business has? I'd say, yeah, like that culture resonates with me, or that storytelling, or that approach to leadership. Take those first quartile lessons. but don't ignore the fourth quartile lessons either, right? Because nobody
Mhm.
and nothing is perfect. And I'm really gonna get away from this sort
Correct.
of framing and putting people on this pedestal where we kind of imagine they have no flaws. Because everyone could be doing something a bit better. So I would say you also want to look at the fourth quartile sort of lessons as well and say, well, what are three things that they are doing? Again, business, leader, individual, team, what have you, that I actually don't want to do, right? They offer me some opportunity to kind of pivot my approach and change the way that if I had an opportunity, I would present this or bring this to market as well. I mean, to me, again, that is sort of like the value of the lessons and the iterative loop that will drive you to success as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love what you said about the quartiles and the fact that, in the fourth, sometimes we are so busy, looking for perfection when in actuality it's not an end state, it's a progression, right? So where does the name 10 to 1 rum come from? I'm gonna give you this joke before you answer this. While I was doing the research, I was like, typically when I go to Carnival, I'd go to the party at 10 a.m. and I probably wouldn't leave until 1 p.m. and definitely rum would be involved, but I'm certain there's more depth to the name. So, just give us, tell us where does the name come from? 10 to 1 rum.
Well, so first of all, I think that like it's one of the joys of again like bringing a brand to life and hopefully having people kind of make it their own. Let it mean whatever you want it to mean in some regards. People, the two most frequent guesses, are what you just said, time of day, like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. or vice
There you go.
versa. Odds of success, like 10 to 1 odds for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
And then of course Trinis will know the iconic Sparrow song 10 to 1 is murder. So they often finish off with is murder every time you say 10 to 1. But the inspiration behind the name actually comes from the original West Indian Federation, right? Which obviously consisted of 10 countries. So this idea of 10 becoming one. And when I'm introducing the story up here in the US market, I'll often refer to the famous Eric Williams quote where he said, 1 from 10 leaves naught, leaves 0. And I say that you're kind of referencing the idea that if you remove 1 from the collective, the whole thing falls apart. And so if you kind of look at the moorings of 10 to 1 as a brand, it is this idea of community, strength in numbers, the idea that we're all stronger together than we are apart. Right now, that is to me, when you think about sort of the intention behind 10 to 1 as a business and as a brand, it has real, genuine moorings in some element of Caribbean history, culture, heritage. But it's a message that's applicable, anywhere in the world, right? I think you'd kind of argue, look around the world today, stronger together than we are apart, strength in numbers, those kinds of messages I think are timely and kind of needed anywhere. And so you're trying to create something that I think has some sort of again, personal equity in terms of your own journey, your own story, but hopefully has resonance on a far bigger stage. And I think, we kind of get some of those nods with the 10 to 1 name. It's a little kind of, if you look at the design on the bottle with the TTO as well, it does reference Trinidad and Tobago, that being our country code. So another nice little shout out to heritage, home country, sense of place as well.
But what I love about what you said, right, is that, you have that as the center of that brand, but the 10 to 1 story speaks to the rest of the Caribbean. Basically, everybody has an involvement, or everybody has a lean in at some point with that bottle, because it feels a part of you. And the stories are so familiar as well. And that's why I said when I was watching it, I just loved and enjoyed the passion. So I was educated on it, what it meant after. But really and truly, my first guess was I'll start this party at 10 and I'll probably go home at 1 in the afternoon in true Trini style, right?
And you should still do that. You should still do that with a bottle of 10 to 1.
Because like you said, you gave me license, right? It's my interpretation. So tell me about this. You just welcomed Grammy Award winner and music sensation Ciara as an investor, co-owner, and director. What was the motivation for this partnership?
It's something that happened pretty organically, to be honest, right? You look at sort of the foundational elements of 10 to 1, some of which we've just discussed, and it's not a brand where I said, oh, I need to go get a celebrity and go do X or Y or Z. I think that, like, we are trying to lean into storytelling, lean into brand building, with a fair amount of intention. I think where the Sierra opportunity presented, we have a bunch of mutual friends actually who had connected us. She'll actually say that it's the first. She had just had her third kid. She had been breastfeeding 10 months, etc., etc. She was given 10 to 1 as a gift. And it was the first drink that she had, a nice celebratory cocktail that she had after her third baby Win was born, and was kind of captivated by not just the product but the story that was tied to it. Had a curiosity for spirits. Rum was the first thing that she had drunk, like, kind of back in the day, her 21st birthday party. I'm telling some of her story here, but there were a lot of kind of serendipitous points of connection. We had a few conversations, and honestly, it was apparent pretty quickly that it'd be a great fit. Whenever C and I talk, like, we talk about this idea of team good energy. There's just some very natural resonance in the way that she sees the world, the way that I see the world. I think we can work really well together as partners. And when people sort of ask about her role against the backdrop of 10 to 1 and everything we've done, what I tell them is, my ambition, or our ambition, is to take all those facets of Caribbean history and culture and heritage, that are in that 10 to 1 bottle, and take it to a global stage, right? So I want to take the story and share it. Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here in New York right now, but you take it to London, maybe you take it to Tokyo and Singapore one day. And if you look at somebody like Sierra, two things are true about her. Number one is, if you take a less literal view, it's in my opinion, everyone can have a different view, but in my opinion, take a less literal view of some of the elements of Caribbean culture that we take pride in. I always talk about things like optimism and spontaneity and joie de vivre and versatility, right? Like we have range, we can flex, you're in the office in the morning, you're in a fete in the evening, right? So, you have on the blazer right now that we see here,
Exactly.
mud and oil.
From turn down to turn up to turn over.
Exactly. And that range to me is so important. And if you kind of make that checklist of attributes, she actually has those. And so again, like, you're finding somebody you can identify with your brand, not in a super literal way. She didn't grow up down the street from me, but she can amplify some of those same attributes that we think are core to 10 to 1. And then, of course, related to that, knowing that she speaks to a broader audience, right? Again, like, who can help you to export that story? Take it to some audiences who haven't maybe seen or heard or engaged with, not just what 10 to 1 has to offer, but hopefully what we as Caribbean people have to offer. I think there's a massive opportunity for her to really kind of help us scale the story there. So combination of those things made a ton of sense. We announced her on 10/1, October 1st last year. It's a lot of fanfare and excitement, and I've been excited to keep on building since then.
Listen, and I even heard another connection 10 months after breastfeeding. First drink, there's the 10 to 1 is coming in so many different ways, but exactly. And what's interesting too is what I'm hearing from you. You said earlier that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to be able to tell that story a million times, right? And it sounds like the synergy, it's a synergistic relationship, not just alignment, but synergies that, as you would say, Sierra can tell your story a million times because she's also passionate, what I'm hearing, about the very thing that you're passionate with in the story of this particular product. I'd say this, when we think about entrepreneurship, we think about the customer experience. What measures do you have in place for a successful customer experience? And like you said, you got 3 customers, the restaurants, the distributors, and also the consumer. What are some of the measures you've put in place?
A ton. Ultimately, if you don't have customers who have passion for what you're doing, and willing to not just repeat but also to kind of scale and share that story, then you're not gonna have too much to work with, right? So ultimately, customer experience kind of at the heart and soul of any business, and certainly any brand that you want to go create. We do a host of different things, right? From regular customer surveys. Again, my Bain background takes me to things like Net Promoter Score, where you want to just understand how likely somebody is to recommend your product to a friend. We've been lucky to have very, very high NPS scores. making sure you get feedback on the product, how it's rated. And then there's also more qualitative stuff, right? Like, how, again, in our case, how willing is somebody to kind of pick up that bottle and take it to a dinner party, share it with a friend, take it to a fete. It's very, very hard to measure anything approaching a viral coefficient in something like spirits in the way that you would in like a D2C brand, but you're looking for some signals and some markers like that as well, right? In a market like New York, you open up 50 accounts, you open up 500 accounts, and as somebody maybe moves from one venue to another, right, like do they sort of place that order for 10 to 1 in that next place as well? So really some of those metrics and markers. But I think like I always tell my team that in terms of our approach to the wider world, there's some moorings in terms of the way in which we do business, right? Like we approach everything with ambition, we approach it with intention. We do right by others even when they don't do right by you, right? Like you have a growth mindset, so you kind of arm your team with a set of principles in the way that they are meant to approach the world. I would tell people that I don't care if it takes them 2 weeks to follow up. You respond in 24 hours, right? Like let them see that like we're hungry, we're aggressive, we're ambitious, right? And so you're doing those, you give your team a set of principles that say like, this is how we present ourselves to the world, all of whom are your customers, right? Because again, it's distributor, retailer, and consumer, and you kind of see that on repeat. So I think having that mousetrap as a business, as a brand, that cultural mooring is super important. And then looking for those feedback signals, ask them how you're doing, how you can improve, where you can get better, set up the info act to like get that feedback or whatever the case might be. I think we're very invested in that as well.
Definitely. And, I'll tell you, sometimes we are so focused on, people who are just high value and not recognizing that every customer, given the digital age, has the opportunity to kind of put your products out there, because there's TikTok, there's Instagram influencers, there's so many things. I want to jump to some of our questions from our studio audience, as well as some questions that we've gotten virtually. And so, one of the questions was when and how did you raise capital to kind of get this business going?
I raised capital pre-launch. I would say almost post-concept pre-launch. So I worked on it alongside my co-founder and good friend, a guy called Zach Waxel, who deserves a lot of credit for this as well. But I worked alongside Zach for a year and a half. We were kind of sitting down there in the trenches, developing the blend, thinking through the creative. All of the early storylining that is 10 to 1 was written by me, which is why you just kind of hear it sort of over and over again, and you can see it authentically. So it took us a year and a half of kind of concepting. And again, you kind of get to this place where you start saying it to people and you see their eyes light up and you get this piece of feedback from them that says like, yeah, you're onto something there. And so we kind of got, to a place where people were saying, yo, like whenever you're ready to launch this business, let us know. We want to participate, right? There was actually a lot of inbound interest that came versus going out to market and saying, hey, I'm about to hang a shingle and raise this capital. So we raised money in early 2019, launched the brand officially June of 2019, so just about 3 years ago at this point. And then we were off to the races then.
So I have another question here coming from our virtual audience. What is the benefit or most valuable lesson you've obtained from working for someone and their vision, then making that decision to go on your own and pursue your vision?
Say that to me again. What's the lesson I've learned from?
What is the benefit or most valuable lesson that you've obtained from working from someone and working on their vision, then making that decision to go after your own vision?
Oh, that's an easy question. That their vision is their vision. And that's kind of what I was sort of referencing with Howard is I reference him ubiquitously because he's been such an influential sort of mentor and person in my own career, and he's an amazing guy. And it was awesome for 3 years to be a part of building his vision and telling his story and all of that. And again, it gave me a bunch of amazing gifts. But then as an entrepreneur, at some point you realize that like, that's someone else's vision and that's their story. So the question you start to ask is, what does it look like to go do that myself? What would my vision be? What would my story be? What would my outlet for sharing those things with the world be? Whether it's a pair of sneakers or a beauty kit or a bottle of rum, right? And that to me is a little bit of where, again, sort of like the entrepreneurial seeds start to get planted. And so, yeah, I think that experience was the yin to the yang that then says, all right, I'm going to go out and do it my own way and do it myself.
So, Marc, we're out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity to just give, a final few words to the entrepreneurs that have joined us virtually, those who are in our studio audience. Just your final words, and how they should kind of go on and move forward in their own entrepreneurial ventures.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks so much again for having me. I think, great to be a part of this movement, this groundswell that you guys are clearly at the forefront of, which is exceptional. I think, and I know we need more of these things in the Caribbean for sure. My final thoughts to anybody who's listening out there would really just be to kind of give you a little encouragement and say that, the road is long, the journey is hard. But it is a very gratifying one. And if you kind of you put in the right investment with the right intention up front, I think you'll see that good things can happen. And I think specific to us, to Caribbean people, to me, the big opportunity here is around, I think we're at a moment in time now where people have more of an appetite for authenticity. Mia Motley gave a speech, I think it was early in the pandemic, sometime in 2020. Which is to me, I don't say it's gospel, but to me, it's one of the most impactful speeches I have heard. And she talks about this idea of cultural confidence, which you see see those thumbprints all over 10 to 1. Like we're leaning into a story with a certain level of cultural confidence. We're unapologetic about sort of the lens or the
Correct.
view, the perspective that we're bringing to the world. And I think my hope is somebody out there listening right now is like, yeah, you know what? Like, we do have a story, we do have this richness, right? We do have these opportunities that, like, we can lean into with a different level of gusto and intention and bring that, whether you're talking about sort of a local market, Caribbean market, global market, the opportunities are there. And so use that as a key ingredient in however you're going to go approach this next chapter of your entrepreneurial journeys. And again, I think we're going to see that collectively some good things are going to come from this next generation of creators.
Marc, they never want me to get up out of my chair, but I really want to get up out of my chair and give you an amazing round of applause for your success and your continuation of success as you move forward. You talk about the 4 quartiles, you talk about brand discipline and how important that is. And what I've taken home is sometimes your product is not even in a bottle. Your product is yourself and how you discipline your own self in putting yourself out there. And you talk about having that story and making certain that you connect with that story. And you've ended off with us today about cultural confidence. And I'm going to take that home. But one of the other things that resonates with me is, show up as your true self. Show up as your authentic self. Be who you are and not attempt to be somebody else, because you can only be the best version of yourself. Thank you so much, Marc. I mean, I'm looking for some amazing things from you. I will continue to follow your work, as I'm sure many other individuals who've joined us virtually as well as in studio will as well. And I will go and find a bottle of 10 to 1 and go and have a glass of 10 to 1 at the finest restaurant ever. We wish you every success, all the best there in New York City. Soon to see you here in the Bahamas. Make certain that you stop over here before you head back home over to the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you so much, and we'll see you sometime soon.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Darren. Thanks everyone. Talk to you soon.